on behalf of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. Well, this is an annual event done with a difference. This is a Zoom meeting, as you can see, and it's a CMA Founders Day oration.
Now, today is really significant. We mark 20 years since this institution was founded. In fact, the actual date was the 3rd of June, 2000. And that is definitely a milestone for all of us to celebrate. And many of you here today joining us have likely been part of that milestone. And Arun, it's something that we can appreciate, that this has been achieved by a completely Lankan homegrown organization, which was actually founded so that we could bring management accounting education to every part of Sri Lanka. Don't you think that's amazing?
Yeah, there were many young people and aspiring managers who really wished to be trained and qualified, but they were facing challenges, not least the high prices that had to be paid in fees for obtaining an overseas qualification, or what they refer to as a foreign qualification. And of course, there was also the matter of foreign exchange that needed to be purchased to be able to join those courses and be part of it.
Definitely. And that's where a well-known chartered accountant with 4 decades of commitment to accountancy decided to step in and actually do something to address that need. And we speak of course, Professor Lakshman R. Vattavala, the founder.
Oh, indeed, yes. And Professor Vattavala had the distinction of being a professional, a practicing accountant in the service of the corporate sector at one time or another, and also served the needs of government. In fact, was chairman of the BOI, amongst many other offices that he held.
He's also held office as a past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, as well as the past president of the South Asian Federation of Accountants. And he addressed another vital need that there was for training for mid-level accounting professionals when he set up the Association of Accounting Technicians, which has now won so much respect and recognition among world accounting bodies like IFAC and SAFA.
And 20 years ago, this body of professional management accountants, which today has been recognized for excellence that it strives to establish in this country in training and equipping managers.
But it wasn't that easy, was it, Arun?
Well, I reckon it wasn't, yes. There was a level of cautionary resistance, we might say, from different sources, and there were doubts that establishing such a homegrown professional body to cater to the needs of management accountants in this country might not work. They doubted that.
So then Professor Vattavala has to labor quite long and hard to actually make things happen. Fortunately, there was a link with the Canadian professional body of management accountants who were willing to consider the viability of Sri Lanka having an institution that would be established here with a curriculum tailored for this country, and examinations also conducted within our range, but comparable to qualifications from anywhere in the world, as many of you can stand testament to.
Yeah, and indeed, this is notable too, that the range of training is provided at prices that are affordable for those aspiring to be managers here in Sri Lanka.
Now, we can't help but mention people who were actually instrumental in offering some tangible help to Professor Vattavala, especially on the Founders Day. They helped him to create this new thing, which, as Arun said, was interpreted by some people as somewhat negative. And it was suggested that it would not be likely to be of value in the real world, where overseas qualifications in management accountancy had already had a huge advantage because of the worldwide stature they had enjoyed over such a long period. But there were many people who actually helped establish this and prove the stature of this body as well. Arun, who may some of them be?
I would like to mention with appreciation Dr. Gamini C.B. Vijayasinghe, that's GCB Vijayasinghe, and he certainly recognized the value here, and he served as the first chairman of the Advisory Council of CMA, then also the Canadian High Commissioner who was serving here at that time. He also was very supportive. And of course, the founding council members, they all were part of this success story. They helped it.
I've more to add to that list. There's the late Minister Kingsley T. Vikramaratne, who did much to push through proposals, and also the late Jairaj Fernandopulle, who was instrumental in first initiating the steps that were needed for incorporation through an act of parliament so that the institution was recognized as a nationally recognized qualification. And the bill was ratified as tabled in House by the then Minister of Trade, Bandula Gunawardena, in the year 2009.
Yes, and then the Minister of Foreign Affairs earlier, Professor G.L. Pierce, he in fact was also supportive and served as the chief guest or was present at the inaugural event. So for all of this outstanding work that has been obviously achieved over this period of time, in expanding the services offered to the people of Sri Lanka, Professor Vatavella was recognized with a titular honor by the head of state. The title was Sri Lanka Sikamani. And he indeed is the founder of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. And CMA has been recognized as a worthy constituent in higher education provisions in this country as a professional education center, and also has been receiving the support of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, we might mention. And the founder also had to strive very hard to have CMA recognized officially with SAFA, that's a South Asian organization, as well as IFAC, that's the international body. And of course, there are other ties that still bind CMA Sri Lanka with the Canadian organization that supported the setting up of it back in 2000.
Now, even as we honor Professor Vatavella on this 20th anniversary and offer him our heartiest congratulations for seeing through the birth and growth of this body, CMA, we also have an oration which is traditional, a special address, followed by a discussion on a theme that actually, Arun, is inescapable at this point in time.
It certainly would seem so, yes. Everybody is talking about the same thing these days. But enough time has now been spent on naming names and assigning names and playing games with political gimmickry. Really, all of that is quite useless. What we really need is to get a grasp on the reality and make moves forward. That's what's important.
So it takes some innovation, creativity, strategic responses, but not least of all, very hard work for very hard times. Is there likely, do you think, to be a shift in corporate governance post-COVID-19?
All right, now, could we ask that question? Could we place that question before the audience, those who are participating in the Zoom meeting? We'd like to get involved. So Dinasha, please go ahead and explain how the participants in under a minute can be part of this little poll or survey.
So having joined the Zoom meeting, you'll find that you are presented with a pop-up right about now, which asks you the question, do you believe that corporate governance needs to change because of this pandemic? It's a multiple choice question, and all you need to do is select the answer which suits you best. That's all. The information that you supply here will give CMA some assistance in designing whatever programs they plan for you in the future, and it'll also provide a glimpse for the orator and our panel of experts into your needs. So they will be very interested to see your response.
Fine, so go ahead now and indicate whether the organization or company you represent have taken on a paradigm shift in corporate governance. So you can select your answer. Okay, Dinasha.
So while you're doing that, let us speak more on this topic, although obviously our experts will have much, much more to say than we do. It's true that we're still not fully aware of the full extent of the challenges that came about because of COVID-19, but it's inevitable that sustainability issues will rise up and that bound to cause fear and disruption amongst our stakeholders. And it will be you who have the responsibility of being that reassuring voice and being the bearers of good news, or more importantly, solutions.
And communication, that's going to be very, very necessary within the organization, not just at the board level or just management and investors, but staff at all levels. They also need to understand what's going on because disruptions can be long term.
Yes, and of course, the salary and bonus payments are going to be major issues of concern, if not friction, amongst your stakeholders. Now, executive pay will possibly need reviews. Capital allocation, reallocation will be a huge part of the challenge, and obviously governance has a lot of oversight.
Okay, so you would be able to discern from the oration the areas that are pertinent to you. So that's what we suggest, that you pay close heed to what's spoken, all right?
But just now, we are going to ask Mr. Hennayak Bandara, in his role as Vice President of CMA, to speak briefly with some warm words of welcome.
Thank you, Dinesha. Good evening to all of you. Founders Day orator, Associate Professor Lakmika Perra, panelist Professor Ho and Dr. Harsha Kabral, Founder President Professor Lakshman R. Vattabala, President CS Sri Lanka, members of the Council, distinguished invitees, dear members, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Business or otherwise, an anniversary is always a milestone to celebrate the achievements and the opportunity to set new goals. In this context, CMA was able to get recognition not only locally, but also globally within a very short period of time. This was possible mainly due to the untiring efforts of our President, Professor Lakshman R. Vattabala, the national-minded strategist. We deeply appreciate the invaluable contribution made by him, as well as past and present council members, staff, and all other stakeholders during the past 20 years. With this note, on behalf of the President and the Governing Council, I am pleased to welcome Associate Professor Lakmika Pereira, Director Education, Center for Integrated Reporting, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia, for readily accepting our invitation to deliver Founders Day oration on the subject of will there be a paradigm shift in corporate governance after COVID-19 pandemic. We are aware that now it is late evening for you, and in spite of that, your participation is a source of encouragement to our institute, and look forward to working closely with you in the future as well. I also would like to welcome two panelists, Professor Ho, Associate Provost, Singapore Institute of Technology, and President Council, Dr. Harsha Kabral. Both of you have associated with CMA in the past by providing technical expertise and as speakers at several conferences and seminars to improve the knowledge and skills of our members. We deeply appreciate for accepting our invitation. Let me also welcome Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, President CS Sri Lanka, member bodies of South Asian Federation of Accountants, Advisory Council members, past and present council members, all distinguished invitees, members of the Institute, Chief Executive Officer and the staff of CMA for participating this important event. Once again, I welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and look forward to your continued support in the future as well. I wish the Foundation Day celebration all success. Thank you. Over to Dinesh.
Thanks to our Vice President, Mr. Bandara. Now we have the results of our poll and survey, and you can see that 41% have said yes corporate governance needs to change, and our business has changed their approach. We also have 38% who are considering their options, and some who are not able to change, so they might benefit definitely from the results or the words that are spoken here today. Arun?
Yep, so that would be of interest to the panel who served today, and also the auditor would be interested to know those results of the poll, and yeah, and even the participants would be curious to know what those results were of the poll. Yeah.
Professor Lakmika Pereira, our orator, is no stranger to CMA, as you heard from Mr. Bandara, and he's certainly familiar to most of you who've linked up on this webinar. He addresses us today from Australia, where he's an academic with Deakin University, and he's been specializing in education program design, governance, and leadership, and also mobile learning with new technologies being harnessed.
And in his consultancy work, he is known to be a strategist.
Now, if there's anything else you want to know about him, apart from the fact that he plays a mean piano, you can check his LinkedIn profile. Here then is Senior Academic Professor Lakmika Pereira.
Thank you very much, Inasha and Arun, and thank you, Professor Vatawala. It's an honor to be here. And I'm absolutely humbled to be in the presence of great people like Professor Ho and Dr. Cabral. So I'm very much honored to be here to present in front of you as well. Now, without further ado, I will quickly start my presentation, and I'm going to share my screen. And please confirm that you can see the slides. Right. So instead of putting it as a question, whether there will be a paradigm shift, I would like to make it as a statement. Paradigm shift in the corporate governance after COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, there is going to be a paradigm shift, whether we like it or not, in one way or another. And it's interesting to discuss how that change is going to be. So again, this is my background. You can look me up on LinkedIn, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat further through that platform. Before going any further, CMA Sri Lanka and Deakin Business School has a very long relationship, going back a couple of years. So as you can see with some of the pictures, we signed an MOU with CMA Sri Lanka a couple of years back with Professor Kim Wati, our Deputy Dean at the time, coming to Sri Lanka to sign that agreement. Also, there's been a couple of visits by our Associate Dean International in the second picture, and our Head of Department of Accounting, Professor Peter Kerry, and our Head Manager International, Ms. Tori Ellenberger, and myself, who visited CMA Sri Lanka many times for various events. I'm also very honored and very happy and very pleased to announce today in this forum that Professor Lakshman Vatawala has been appointed as adjunct professor with Deakin Business School within the Faculty of Business and Law, particularly attached to the Department of Accounting. So congratulations, Professor. And as you can see, the letter on the side issued by the Vice Chancellor of our university, Professor Ian Martin, and the appointment was made in January 2020. So congratulations, Professor Vatawala. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you at Deakin. Right, now let's get into the serious business of looking at the presentation today. In terms of COVID-19, it's an interesting place to be. Here is COVID-19 at a glance as of today, or rather earlier to maybe a day ahead, or sorry, a day behind. So at the moment, we have a total of 8.2 million cases around the globe, 446,500 deaths, and 4.3 million that have recovered. So that gives us a perspective of where this particular virus stands. That is about close to 6% mortality rate, which is relatively high compared to a lot of other viruses in recent times. But let's put this into context. We have, in terms of active cases, 3.5 million and closed cases of about 4.7 million. out of the active cases, there are 55,000 cases which are either serious or critical at this point in time globally. So this kind of sets the stage as to where we are in terms of the coronavirus. Okay, let's look at the history and the impact of viruses. Okay, so the first diagram, which is the one onto your left screen, shows the number of deaths globally with various viruses throughout the history. If you look at the first one, the bubonic plague, or what we call Black Death, during the time of the medieval times, there were 200 million deaths. That's a very large number. Smallpox in 1520 killed 56 million people. Spanish flu, 1918 to 1919, which is something similar to what we are going through, killed 40 to 50 million people, and so forth. So coronavirus, if you can see my pointer here, is right over here at the moment, but it's still ongoing. So there's roughly about 450,000 deaths at this point in time, and it is progressing. So earlier when I looked at this particular slide, it was somewhere around here, but it's slowly now jumping the ranks and going forward. So there is a serious issue here of the virus having impact on a global scale. If you look at the panel on the right, you can see the history of pandemics in terms of time. So you can see the different viruses and their effects based on a time frame. Okay, so I won't go into detail. You can have this, have a look at this in your own good time. But let's move on. Now, this is, I think, a very important slide that I would like to elaborate on a little bit. If you look at the first panel, which is this one over here, I'm talking about the export exposure of different countries in the world in terms of GDP percentage with the latest year available. So the one in dark blue is most dependent, light blue is less dependent, and the gray is least dependent. So that means these countries that are in dark blue are very dependent on export of goods. In terms of Sri Lanka, it's light blue. So we are less dependent, but still dependent on the international markets for exports. So countries like Australia, for example, are least dependent. India is least dependent, China is least dependent, US is least dependent, and so forth. In terms of global health epidemic preparedness in 2019, the Global Health Security Index is a scale of 0 to 100, where 100 is best and 0 is worse. Sri Lanka was ranked as least prepared. Again, that doesn't mean that we have not done what we could, but this is an index that measures that we are least prepared in terms of the health index and various aspects around it. So now if we combine these two together, how would the pandemic affect us on an economic scale? We are relatively lucky in terms of how we are affected compared to some of the other countries. We fall into this little area here. We are low prepared. Our preparedness is low, which is this particular column. But given our dependence is less, we fall into this middle column. So countries like Bangladesh or Pakistan are also less prepared or least prepared, but they are less dependent on exports. Therefore, they fall into this category. But again, we fall into this category, and therefore we need to consider in that context what we are going to discuss today. So again, I've just narrowed down to Sri Lanka a little bit further, and I did explain this a little bit more, but this is just to kind of put the focus on Sri Lanka at this point in time. So as I said earlier, we fall into this category here, low preparedness, but low, medium level of exposure in terms of economic preparedness. Let's put it to context, the consequences, the economic consequences of COVID-19 globally. Now, this is based on region, okay? If you look at the amount of loss based on GDP, this is in US million. Looking at South Asia, we are looking at 29,000 million. So that's about, that's a very large amount of money. Australia is 22,437 million. So it is a lot of money in terms of lost GDP. So in that context, let's move into how COVID-19 has affected corporate governance on a global scale, but I will narrow it down to the effects in Sri Lanka as well. Okay. Obviously, it's a very profound challenge globally and to every aspect of life and business as we know it. Okay. Now, SMEs and large corporates have both been affected due to COVID-19 in varying degrees. Okay. So, particularly MSMEs, I would like to extend SMEs to MSMEs, which is micro, small, and medium enterprises. So affected businesses have been affected in the short term, medium term, and long term. I'll take some examples as we go through to explain some of the concepts that I'm talking about. Now, in analyzing this, as a futurist, I'd like to look at the implications of corporate governance based on 6 broad aspects. So 6 key principles: governance itself, the resources, the business model of an organization, the external environment, the outcomes, and communication perspective. So I will touch on all these things step by step and give some examples. And Professor Ho and Dr. Kabra will also elaborate on some of these things in more detail later on. So let's look at the first aspect, the effects from a corporate governance itself. What kind of issues are going to be there? Now, based on the survey that was done here with the participants, some of the organizations have said that you have changed and you have adapted. So some of the things that would have affected you, if you can just map this into your own organizations, it'll be really good. I'm really interested in getting some feedback from you as well in relation to what I'm saying now. Potential effect on the vision and mission of an organization would have also changed, which I like to classify as purpose. Vision and mission is so old school, so to speak. So the better way of saying it is purpose. What is the purpose of an organization? Okay. So if you look at the purpose, the vision and mission may have to adapt or change based on where and how the organization is placing itself in going forward post COVID-19. Governance structures. Does the board have any lack of expertise? For example, if we have vanilla boards, meaning if all the board expertise is around one area, and if there's no diversity in the board, that would have had some significant effect on preparedness. For example, I sit on a board of the IPA in Australia. So we actually looked at the risk of COVID-19 in February, relatively before the actual pandemic hit Australia in end March, early April. So in that sense, we were prepared because we had a few people who said, look, this is not going well. We need to consider this and sort something out. So we need to also, going forward post-COVID-19, consider the board structures and see if there is a good balance, a good mix of people who can actually assist in broader thinking. Executive board compensation strategies are also going to be affected, meaning there are lots of job losses. There are job cuts. There are issues with companies going under. So with all of these things happening, how is the executive and the board being compensated? For example, if you're firing 100 people in a company and the managers and CEOs and the board are taking bonuses, how is that going to look? How is that going to affect? So these are some of the things that organizations need to consider in terms of legitimacy. Future risk and opportunities. Is a risk management plan adequate? Is there a good risk management plan in place to deal with contingencies and unexpected events such as COVID-19? Many organizations were caught off guard. I mean, I would say almost all organizations were caught off guard, but it's how you adapt. But if you had seen these things through a little bit earlier, you might consider this as a risk and take this into consideration. It's interesting that I was going through one of my old presentations in 2016, which I made in Sri Lanka, interestingly. And one of the things I had discussed was border closures and global events that could hinder global trade. So it's kind of interesting to look at it from that perspective now. Let's go to the next point in terms of strategy and resource allocation. Are we allocating resources in the best possible manner now? So efficiency is important post-COVID-19 because our resources would have depleted because of the effects of COVID-19. And therefore, we need to consider how we are going to allocate our existing resources in the best possible manner going forward. Current and future performance is another aspect. Now, organizations had some kind of plans, some kind of predictions, forward-thinking statements, which also need to be reconsidered. I'll take Deakin University for an example. We have had a significant loss of international students because of the border closures. So because of this reason, we have to reconsider our current or this year and future performance as well in terms of 2021, 2022. So my prediction is it's going to take at least 2 to 3 years for most organizations to recover from this particular crisis. I wouldn't call it a crisis, to be honest. That's a wrong word. I would like to call it a realignment. I will explain that a little bit further on. So current and future outlook is another thing that you need to look at. Performance and outlook is a difference. Performance is how you're doing. Outlook is how you're going to look like in a couple of years' time and at present. So there is a distinct difference here. How would the performance affect the outlook and the ongoing viability of the company? That's another aspect in terms of governance perspectives that we need to look at. Let's look at it from a resource perspective. Given that I come from an IR background, I'm going to talk about resources based on the 6 capitals. So financial considerations is very important at this point in time. Capital asset considerations, intellectual property considerations. Now, this is a big ticket item in terms of current markets because every country in the world is trying to find a vaccine. That's intellectual property. They're using the human workforce to investigate, to do research, and to try to find a vaccine. So that intellectual property is becoming more and more relevant, and how we allocate that intellectual capital is going to be playing a crucial role in time to come. Human capital considerations. Now, many organizations are reducing their staff, making organizations redundant. Making staff redundant. However, is that a short-term view? Should they actually try to weather the storm in terms of medium-term and long-term viability of the organization? These are some of the things. There's no answer here, but these are some of the questions that each individual organization has to think about. Effects on the environment has more or less been positive. If you can look at the effects in China, in Italy, you can see that the environment and even in England has had a positive impact. For example, you have seen in India, there was a couple of animals that are just roaming around the streets, which you wouldn't see otherwise. In England, you find some mountain goats coming down into towns. I even saw a crocodile going for a stroll in the US because of the people moving away into lockdown and the environment blossoming because of that lack of human intervention in the natural environment. Another aspect is to talk about inter and intra-business relationships, or what I call, or what the IR framework calls, social and relationships capital. So there will be some change in the dynamics, both internally and within organizations and between organizations, between countries, between states, and so forth. I'll elaborate that a little bit further in terms of external environment as well. In terms of the business model, we are talking about how an organization does business. Okay, so in terms of the business model, how would the inputs of a business model change? It has already changed significantly. How we do things are different. I'll take Deakin University as an example. We have moved all our classes from on-campus to cloud. We have been running cloud classes for the last 10 to 15 years. I was one of the pioneers to run one of the first online classes in 2006, 2007 at Deakin. So we've been doing it for a long time, but having that model and having the online classes and the campus classes, for us to move to an online class has been seamless. So we were very easily able to take the on-campus students and put them into a cloud environment. So the inputs have technically changed. So we no longer conduct face-to-face classes. Everything is done on Zoom and synchronous learning. So obviously inputs are changing. Does the current business activity suit the future? Probably not. I'll probably be working from home till November, which is an extended period of time from March, or rather April, to November. That's a very long period of time. So how we do business is significantly going to change. Okay. Also, offshoring, supply chains, and all these things are going to be considered post-COVID. For example, how would Sri Lanka adapt for the shortage of things coming into Sri Lanka? But we are lucky in a sense, we are less dependent or moderately less dependent on imports and exports. We are relatively doing well in terms of being self-sufficient, but can we do more? That's something to consider. What about the outcomes? What are the outcomes intended? Do we now start catering for internal markets as opposed to external markets? For example, because of the border closures, how do we promote things? For example, Sri Lanka is based on tourism. The economy, one of the key economic incomes is based on tourism. How do we promote tourism? Now, if you take Australia, we have about 24 million people. Sri Lanka has close to 22 to 23 million people. So can we promote the tourism within the country itself? So these are some of the things and outcomes that we need to consider as a whole in terms of how we do things and how we cater for different markets. In terms of the external environment, issues to consider, this is based on a board, an organization or entity, depending on which block you're looking at. Okay, how has the external environment changed? So external environment post-COVID has changed quite a lot. Australia has isolated itself. We've closed our borders. New Zealand has. Sri Lanka has to a certain degree as well. And also, some countries are going the opposite way. They are saying they are opening their borders. So how would these different dynamics affect organizations or the business unit you're looking at? How would the inter-country relationships change? For example, at the moment, China and Australia are, there are some, different viewpoints on how things are working out. So there is a relationship deterioration between these two countries. And how would each of the different countries deal with this? How would intra-country relationships deal with this? For example, Victoria has closed, few of the states in Australia has closed their borders. South Australia has closed their borders to Victoria. And so today morning, there was some news item where the two premiers were arguing with each other in terms of borders. Look at Sri Lanka, for example. There were curfew in Colombo district, and the curfew was lifted in some of the other districts. So there is a intra-country relationships change as well in terms of post-COVID-19 moving forward as well. Share markets and the price of company stocks and also overall indices will be affected either positively or negatively. Now, I do a small experiment in the share market for the last year where I've invested some money as an experiment, which I'm writing a journal on, okay? So I've actually gained about 2.5% even with the pandemic going on, which is pretty good comparatively. Whereas, why is that happening? So that is something that all the different organizations will need to consider in terms of their own share prices. Also, due to the volatility in share prices, there's a potential additional threat for external environments such as takeovers. So when the share prices go significantly down, there are predator companies that will come and try to take over a hostile takeover of those organizations. So that is something that also has to be considered post-COVID-19. Now, many of you think that we have hit the worst. We haven't. The worst is yet to come. I would say worst, but the difficult times is yet to come because we are still experiencing growth and the second wave of COVID-19 coming through. So the effects of this would be towards the latter stages of the year or even felt up to the next year or two. Okay, Australia, for example, has moved into recession officially. In terms of the outcomes, issues to consider from the outcomes perspective, economic outcomes due to job losses and related outcomes would also need to be significantly considered. So I was talking to someone in the US who was accepted to Harvard Business School, and this person was saying that at the moment they had to before COVID-19 they had the funds to do the Harvard course, but now the person has lost a job and therefore is no longer in a position to follow that particular course. So it has changed people's lives in terms of their job losses. Okay, COVID-19 can also be considered as a disruptor. Now we talk about digital disruption, but this is a health disruption that has caused certain changes and challenges on how we do life as a whole. As an organization, governance would need to consider this particular change and look at it as a disruptor. As I said earlier, it's not a negative. It is what it is. So we need to look at it from that perspective and change how we do things in going forward. There are social impacts, including negative impacts and positive impacts. For example, some of the negative impacts, I wouldn't have to mention job losses, isolation in terms of working from home, teams not working as efficiently. I mean, if you look at humans, we are social animals. We need that interaction to work with others, okay? So the positive impact is community togetherness. For example, this is the first time in the last 4 years that I've actually got together with my neighbors and had a barbecue. So, I mean, it's bringing people together in that sense, post-COVID-19. Also, if you look at communities, families, I take myself as an example again. I've spoken to some of the people in my family who I haven't spoken to years more regularly during the pandemic than before. So there are some social aspects of it, and this also reflects in the organizations as well. If you look at the new dynamics of intercountry and intercountry relationships, there are covert and overt challenges. If you look at the news today, the pandemic has also created certain imbalances of different countries and disagreements between countries. For example, there is a border dispute going on between China and India at the moment. There are some issues going on with North Korea and South Korea, with China and Taiwan, in terms of US and China. So there are some sensitive issues happening. I wouldn't say they are directly maybe related to COVID-19, but I would say that it is, because COVID-19 is such a disruptor that it creates different power dynamics. Another a very serious aspect of it, but very little spoken of, is the mental health and well-being of different people, organizations, employees, working from home, and so forth. This applies to individuals, to a family, society, and a community as a whole. If you look at community perceptions of COVID-19, there's a stigma around COVID-19 patients, particularly in some of the Asian countries. If you get COVID-19, you're looked at in a negative way. That should not be the case. These stigmas are just perceptions that has to be taken into consideration and changed to a certain degree. Educational approaches and outcomes. In terms of how we approach education is also going to be changed in terms of corporate education and so forth. I mean, some of the educational aspects that we need to consider is, how do we manage this in the future? How are we going to deal with more pandemics like this in going forward? Now, for those of you who have kids, some of us, we had homeschooling for a few months, online schooling, in some cases, no schooling at all. So there are different aspects of this where organizations have to look at their training of staff, and governance structures will need to be in place to approach educational needs of their staff and their communities or their extended communities. Security related outcomes. During this period, I know of 2 very large organizations which has had cyber attacks in the middle of COVID-19. So, and also you have to look at physical security as well. There are some border issues in terms of China and India at the moment. So security related outcomes would also need to be considered in the overall governance. Now, I'm talking about both organization and country specific governance structures as well. In terms of communication perspective with stakeholders, how do we communicate with key stakeholders in terms of corporate reporting because of COVID-19? In the past, there were different ways of communication. Is this going to be, do we need to change these? Do we need to revisit these in going forward? I would say yes. For example, if you look at AGMs and other statutory meetings virtually, some legislation, some country legislation will not allow this. Governments may have to consider changing their rules and regulations to accommodate something like this during post-COVID-19. Corporate rules may not facilitate AGMs to be hosted online. There are at least a couple of companies that I know that requires physical presence of an AGM. They do not consider a virtual AGM as valid. So how do we deal with lockdowns and post-COVID-19 in terms of corporate constitutions. Continuous disclosure due to COVID-19, due to the disclosure requirements of company change. Now, companies are required to report significant changes to their organization due to the listing organization in going forward. COVID-19 has had such a disruptor. How do organizations communicate these changes would be something to consider in the long run. How do we communicate with internal and other external stakeholders on a day-to-day perspective? Now, here's a good example. Virtual meetings is one option. Working from home. How do we organize virtual meetings? Do we provide the resources? Are there any other resources that we have in place in going forward? Working from home. Now, what about health and safety? What about workplace safety in terms of homes? Do you have a place to work at home? Do you have the resources and internet connection to run a virtual meeting? So all these things have to be taken into consideration going forward in terms of a governance structure. So what I want to present here is how does integrated thinking help to restructure our way of sorting out the governance issues that I spoke about in the last couple of slides. Now, for those of you who are familiar, please excuse, but I will read through this very quickly. Integrated thinking is the active consideration by an organization of the relationships between its various operating and functional units and the capitals that the organization uses or affects. Integrated thinking leads to integrated decision-making and actions that consider the creation of value over short, medium, and long term. So my emphasis here is the short, medium, and long term, which organizations need to take into consideration. The second point is a statement from Professor Mervyn King, who visited CMA Sri Lanka, I think it was last year or year before. But I won't read through that. I'll send through the slides to you for your to be distributed, so you can have a look at that in your own time. Now, here is the proposed updated framework for integrated reporting. Those of you who are familiar with Lord of the Rings, the movie, I've kind of taken a line off that and I say one framework to manage them all. So I consider this the overarching umbrella framework that can help to manage corporate dialogue and make organizations more efficient and better in terms of integrated thinking. So if you look at the proposed updates, we talk about purpose, vision, and mission in the middle. We talk about the external environment, but one of the major changes is the outcomes, the separation of outcomes from the previous one. So we talk about short, medium, and long-term outcomes. And you can see the governance structure going through risks, performance, outlook, and strategy and resource allocation. So I won't spend any more time on this, but this is one of the frameworks that you can use to tackle COVID-19 and its implications in terms of governance in going forward. So Sri Lanka specific thoughts. Some of the things that Sri Lanka can consider is to have a look at the value chains that we have at present, which may have been affected due to COVID-19 and the closure of borders. Some consideration would be to boost internal production and manufacturing of both goods and services. Internalization of economy would need to be considered. Now, sometimes globalization is considered to be good, but I'm always a believer of middle ground. So internalization, which is the opposite of globalization, would also need to be considered to a certain degree in going forward. Consider governance structures to incorporate lessons learned from COVID-19, particularly in the regulatory side of this, in terms of corporate governance, in terms of company legislation, and in terms of countries' legislation to support some of the changes that would be needed going forward. IT security is some of the things to consider, given the remote and online working environments. Also consider existing infrastructures within the country, which may be required to support governance shift. So would Sri Lanka be able to support a remote working environment? Do we have sufficient internet speeds, sufficient capability to do that? I think we are getting there and we should be in a good position to do that. The pandemic showed some of the most vulnerable groups. These are the people who are the most affected, the day wage workers, the micro and small enterprises who work on a day-to-day salaries. These are the people who are most negatively affected. Both corporates and government may need to consider for future how the governance structures can be changed, both at a macro and micro level, to see how these groups can be productive during the time of lockdown. I mean, you're talking about a workforce who will be stuck at home, who are unproductive. How do we enable them to be productive even at home? Shifting the mindset is also needed for Sri Lankans in terms of the remote and cloud-based workplaces. I mean, being a Sri Lankan, I mean, working from home or working in the cloud is a bit of a challenge for most of us. Given that we have extended families living in under one roof, we have grandparents, in-laws, parents, and all these other people living under one roof. How do we, in most cases, which is traditional, how would we deal with remote and cloud-based workspaces? Also, efficiency in working from home needs to be further thought through in terms of public perception and productivity. So various professional bodies, including CMA, has a unique role to play in this regard and moving this agenda forward. So this is my last slide, broad implications and takeaways. Post-COVID-19, pandemic world would definitely be something significantly different. It will not be the world we left behind pre-COVID-19. So things are going to be significantly different. Consider how you act within your own place of employment. Consider some of the aspects discussed today and look at how you can implement it in your own organization. See the relevance of integrated reporting and integrated thinking in the current context and see how it can be useful in addressing some of not only the corporate governance aspects, but also the entire ecosystem of an organization. If not already done so, and I'm very much aware that Sri Lanka is a leader in the space of integrated reporting, but if you haven't done so, consider going down the path of integrated reporting and integrated thinking in your own organizations. It can be a very powerful tool post-COVID in changing the strategy and looking at the short, medium, and long term. Mental health and well-being is another significant post-COVID implication, which I elaborated a little bit earlier. Depression due to job losses, due to isolation, all these things are playing a key role. And in a society like Sri Lanka, we are not open enough to discuss these things and we struggle in silence. So these are some of the things that we need to consider. Finally, work as a collective in facing this pandemic together as a society and a community. I've seen some amazing stories in Sri Lanka, coming out of Sri Lanka, in how the community as a society, we work so well together. It makes me proud to be Sri Lankan with seeing some of these news items coming from Sri Lanka. So that ends my presentation, and I'm happy to take on questions either now or later if there are any. Thank you.
Okay, so we heard the invitation, and you're most welcome, friends who are watching and sharing this event. You're most welcome to send in your questions, and we'll see how we can fit that in and whether there is a possibility of the response. But thank you very much, Lakmika, for that oration on this 20th anniversary of CMA Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, while appreciating that so much has been shared that sparks thought and consideration by Professor Pereira, we have, as you know, an expert panel who will comment on the paradigm shift in corporate governance post-COVID-19. To start, we have with us another academic from the Singapore Institute of Technology, Professor Ho Yu Ki. He's the Associate Provost of Skills, Future and Staff Development. He has his background in public accounting and is currently a director in a listed insurance company in the Singapore Stock Exchange. Of course, many of you know of his commitment to CMA Sri Lanka, especially since he's a member of the Advisory Council of CMA. We welcome you and invite you to speak now, Professor Ho Yu Ki.
Thank you. Let me take over the screen as it is. All right. Congratulations, Professor Watawala, for your outstanding contribution to CMA Sri Lanka. It's my tremendous privilege to be able to share with you this evening this talk. And Professor Lakmika, thank you so much for your very insightful talk. Given the time that I have, which is 10 minutes, I just want to pick up on one particular issue concerning the corporate governance after COVID-19 pandemic, which is due diligence and vigilance. I want to look specifically in the context of protecting your financial capital. This has to do with an article that I'm writing in Singapore, and this is the top largest listed companies in Singapore, the top 10 largest companies in Singapore. And what we have done is that we have looked at the amount of goodwill, right? And in the books, we have about $29 billion worth of goodwill out of about $1 trillion worth of total assets. And if you look at those in yellow, for example, Singapore Telecommunication, 23% of its total assets are actually in goodwill, or Thai Beverage, 35.8%. The question we want to ask is, during this pandemic, with the ensuing recession, what is going to happen to all this goodwill? I also have taken the opportunity to take a look at Sri Lanka. These are the 10 largest listed companies in Sri Lanka. And you realize that although the goodwill is not a substantial proportion of the total assets, nonetheless, they are non-trivial too. Like for example, Dialog, which is a technology company, is about 5.3%. Lanka IOC is about 2.7% of its total assets. So the big question that we want to deal with is, given the impending recession, right, in terms of the changing in terms of the assets prices, what should we do in terms of impairment loss? And the accounting standard makes it very clear that impairment loss is defined as the amount in which the carrying amount or the carrying value of an asset has depreciated or has deteriorated such that the recoverable amount is less than the carrying amount. So impairment loss then becomes the carrying amount minus the recoverable amount, which is the loss in value of the assets. And the recoverable amount, interestingly, is predicated upon the higher of two possible values: the fair value of disposal or less cost of disposal, and the value in use. That means how much value is those assets going to generate for you, right? So the interesting thought pattern here is that in terms of the value in use, the discounted cash flow model is generally used in terms of accounting basically for this valuation, right? And in terms of the formula, I'm sorry that it didn't pop up in the screen. The formula has two parts of it. The top part is the cash flow, the bottom part is a discount rate. And we ask ourselves the important question: during this pandemic and the post effect of this pandemic, what would happen to the future cash flow of the entity? What would happen to the discount rate? And interestingly, the discount rate is in many ways defined by the capital asset pricing model. It all sounds so technical. And this is where the corporate governance comes in most important. Why is it most important? Because the impairment loss must be computed or derived at by looking at the recoverable amount. And the recoverable amount, the question lies in how do you ensure the integrity of the recoverable amount, where it is based on judgment, where it is based on valuation methodology, right? And so this is where my suggestion will be that in this post-COVID situation, the corporate governance of the board, the corporate governance of companies become a lot more important in order for us to ensure that the financial statements have integrity. And in terms of the corporate governance, where do they come from? How do we exercise this corporate governance? The board of directors sits at the helm of the company. At the end of the day, they will have to attest to the fact that the financial statements are true and fair or reliable as it is. The audit committee, the experts, financial experts among the board, who has to look at the way in which the numbers have been produced from the management, having gone through the internal auditors and the external auditors, right? So goodwill impairment gives us a setting in which allows us to ask the question, what changes after the COVID-19, right? The change that takes place is that assets would have depreciated in terms of value, and we need to arrive at the right numbers having proper governance. This is good news. In the Sri Lankan economy, remember, your accounting also has this substantial part called the employee benefit liability. And again, the entire computation will be affected, right, post-COVID-19. And how do you ensure that this employee benefit liability is appropriately computed? And let me end by looking at and saying that the corporate governance in this post-COVID-19 pandemic has to do with having greater due diligence and vigilance, particularly coming from those who are endowed with the responsibility for corporate governance. And it's important for us to take a step back and literally to remind ourselves, this post-COVID world, it is not business as usual, right? And we have to look carefully in terms of governance, where the numbers have integrity. All right, I'll stop here and then I'll deal with it in the panelists. Thank you very much for hearing my sharing.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ho Yu Ki. A very interesting commentary we had there. Now next, we have Dr. Harsha Cabral, well known to most of you. He has demonstrated much interest in his professional career in law as it relates to trade and commerce, including at the international level. He read for his PhD in corporate law with the University of Canberra, Australia.
And he also has hands-on experience in Sri Lanka's corporate world, serving as chairman now of Tokyo Cement Company, is the director on several boards, including Haley's PLC, and is also a sitting member of the International Chamber of Commerce, or ICC, located in Paris, as well as other international level commercial arbitration bodies. So here's Dr. Cabral, please.
Thank you, Arul, and thank you, Dinesha. For first time, I must congratulate Professor Watawala on his extreme contribution, and my sincere congratulations to him. And let me congratulate Professor Lakmika for the brilliant presentation, and also I must congratulate Professor Ho for the insights he brought into this particular aspect of corporate governance. Now, let me say that I would spend these 10 minutes highlighting three different areas. The Sri Lankan aspect, basically, how Sri Lanka got this corporate governance mechanism in place, firstly, though it happened in 1992 with the Cadbury Code. Through the Institute of Chartered Accountants, we got it in 1997. That too, we just started with initially with the financial aspects as code of best practice. Then in 2002, for audit committees. 2003, we came up with the code of best practice on corporate governance. And then Chartered Institute, together with the Securities Exchange Commission, SEC, within 2004 and 2005, came up with a further improved version. And from 2007 April, we introduced the rules on corporate governance for listed companies for the first time. And thereafter, from 2007 April, it became mandatory. Now, the mandatory code of corporate governance for listed companies is very, very minimal. It deals only with the independent non-executive directors, the disclosure related to directors, what is independence, remuneration committee, audit committee, all headed by independent directors. And then in 2017, again, by moving forward with the Institute of Chartered Accountants and the SEC, we had a corporate governance committee, and we introduced the voluntary code, which is very, very wide. Now that is open to any company, not only to the listed companies. So the history of corporate governance in Sri Lanka is thus, but for banking and non-banking, we have the central bank coming in. The monetary board has stricter guidelines on corporate governance. Now that is with regard to the corporate sector. And in the public sector, there are again stricter directives, and most of the public organizations though they don't come strictly under the corporate governance mechanisms of the Securities Exchange Commission, but they do follow corporate governance mechanisms in Sri Lanka, though there is the impact we have on corporate governance to a certain extent. That is the first part. I would just touch on the history, then the birth and growth of corporate governance in this soil. Then I must say, in the background, we, unlike Singapore or Australia, we have a different situation, because even when you talk about the birth of corporate governance, we were going through a civil war. You know, from 1983, we had a war we were fighting with the terrorism, and for 30 years we had this ongoing thing. And then in 2014, we were again affected with a fairly serious tsunami, which it affected the country and the economy. And in 2019, well, the Easter bombing, right? So more than a year ago, we were all crippled. We like the COVID in 2019, April also, we had a similar setback. Then into 2020, we got this COVID from February onwards, you see. So you would see that the background we are in, we are to a certain extent resilient to the excesses or the viruses that can hit in different ways. And it's not a fairly, I mean, most of the companies are ready or they have faced disaster, because as I told you, even when corporate governance was introduced, we were going through a war. And so it was a serious war which ended up for 30 years. So that's the second part. Now, then I come to the third part. Well, what exactly is corporate governance, right? Corporate governance and the other end of corporate social responsibility is to ensure that all stakeholders and the society at large are happy about your business, right? When I say all stakeholders, that it includes majority, minority shareholders, your employees, your customers, your creditors, and then the society at large. So now we know with this, human capital, as the speaker dealt with very clearly, has become very valuable, right? One of the most important. Now, I would say, now we, unlike in other countries, we have now, for example, in Singapore, immediately with the COVID thing, they introduced the law, right? They dealt with most of these laws. They came up with the COVID specific law, right? And Act number 14 of 2020, COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act 2020. Then in UK, they came up with the Coronavirus Act 2020. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't do that because the parliament was dissolved pending the session. Right now, we can't think of any law. So we have to work within the parameters we have, right? And so the problems, all these companies, the individuals, the corporate, dealing with the health aspect and the businesses regarding premises, inability to perform contracts, financial distress, then also conducting meetings, so on and so forth, court proceedings, tax matters, tenancies. These are problems we have to face with right throughout. So my thinking, firstly, is that if the company had in place proper corporate governance mechanisms, they ought to have faced this. Unfortunately, most of the companies were not ready, right? Though we have gone through these things. Now, being a Buddhist country, you would know that 2,500 years ago, Lord Buddha in his Dhammapada had said so many things, which I always compare when in my lectures where I say, well, whether it's Dhammapada or 10 Commandments, well, they're all governance, right? So individual governance or corporate governance, there's not much of a difference. Whether you follow or not is a different thing. But you need not change it. If 2,500 years ago, it was the same. So when you look at it, whether they follow on, whether you follow or not is up to you. Another brilliant thing, 2,500 years ago, Lord Buddha said, your own income, 1/4 of your income should be kept aside, right? That is for a future, the rainy day. Even the ants follow that mechanisms. They save something for the rainy day. So if the corporate body followed these mechanisms, knew what they were going through, not like just when you are making a whole lot of profits, collect the dividends and keep the shareholders happy is not the issue. You got to remember there can be a rainy day. How are we going to face this? Now, there were a couple of mishaps, like, now we in our own organizations, we have been able to now going forward with the assistance of the CSC. Actually, the CSC came up with they gave a undertaking also that they helped the organizations to hold, they gave guidelines to hold AGMs, and several organizations had two types of virtual annual general meetings and hybrid annual general meetings. In bank I'm involved, we did the first hybrid annual general meeting. Perfectly done, right? Maybe going forward, you might have to amend your articles, amend your company's statutes and CSC guidelines, so on and so forth. So my thinking is, we ought to have been ready, one thing. Now, even our university system, for example, our university systems were not prepared. Whereas there are a few exceptions. I'm involved with the University of Sri Javadama, the PIM, Postgraduate Institute of Management. They conduct their lectures, PIM. Now, they didn't sacrifice a single day because they were ready for this. They were online already. All lectures, exams were conducted. There's another organization I'm involved, SLIT. They didn't even sacrifice even a few days because they were ready. Exams are held, lectures are held, students are not idling. Unfortunately, the universities couldn't do that. Still, they haven't started lectures, right? Even after 3 months. So now that is not being ready. So I feel if you are following proper corporate governance mechanisms, it's not a case of shifting the goalpost. If your company is complying with level playing field, transparency in management, you act as a good corporate citizen, you got to be ready for anything. You don't have to wait for a tsunami or COVID-19 or whatever to come and hit you, then suddenly to wake up and say, because I'm involved in certain organizations, we didn't even sacrifice 2-3 days. The factories were open. The Trincomalee cement factory was open in 3 days. We got special permission. Because not only the COVID, we have another issue. Arising out of COVID, there is an import ban on certain items. So the companies that are faced with, you've got to move on and get going on there are so many other things that have arisen out of this COVID situation. So fortunately, the government side of it has handled most of it well, right? The public corporation, the health sector, all that due to discipline, even without a parliament in place, things have been done. That is why we have been able to even to control with 11 deaths only, right? With the 22 million people, there are only 11 deaths, right? So that's a success story to a certain extent. So the private sector also, right? Taking into consideration most of the concerns and the principles. And I think that for Sri Lanka, no paradigm shift in corporate governance is necessary, but to ensure that the corporate governance principles are practiced to the letter. If that is done, you don't have to keep on moving the goalpost. I'll be happy to take on a few questions. These are my personal views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cabral, for presenting several incisive points to ponder. Now, having contemplated the ideas that our experts have put forward, here's another question to you in the audience. And like we did earlier, this too is a multiple choice question. You would need to select the response most relevant to you. A poll will come up asking whether after you have heard what was presented this evening, you intend to do nothing because your business already has changed its governance in response to COVID, or to change, or whether you intend to change indeed in response to COVID, perhaps to learn more, or whether, like Dr. Cabral mentioned, you feel there is no need for a paradigm shift. So there are 4 options open to you. Now, speaking of your responses, many thanks for the wonderful good wishes that you've shared in the chat. And we noticed too that, as Dr. Cabral pointed out, that a question or 2 have come through, which will be addressed, time permitting. But before that,
Yeah, we do appreciate very much the support that we have from this audience. Dinasha has already mentioned how keenly you have been paying attention to what's been going on, and that's good. Now, we have Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, who serves in the Advisory Council of CMA, and he also is the incumbent president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. I would like to invite him to express a few thoughts after this oration, but it does appear that we will have to delay a little bit his participation. So may I, at this point in time, hand over the proceedings to the founder and indeed president of CMA Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman R. Watawala, and we will perhaps be able to take some thoughts that you have submitted for review even now. But here's Professor Watawala.
Thank you. What I will do is, there are a few questions that have come up. First one, I would like to maybe direct it at Mr.
Can't hear Dr. Watawala.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. Now, one of the main things I would first direct to Professor Latmika, this is really relating to the SME sector and the self-employed sector. Now, I know that Australia, they have taken a lot of measures to maybe give relief to this sector. How does this sector, because even in Sri Lanka, we find that in almost all sectors, now one of the worst affected is the tourism sector. Of course, there they have the organized sector and the unorganized sector. Of course, also on the SME sector, a similar sort of thing. How do you think that this sort of thing could be related, although we are talking of the corporate governance? How do you really maybe handle the situations of these unorganized sector or unregistered sector?
Sure. That's a very important and valuable question. This is what I call the micro businesses that are around the major tourism businesses. So it's a very difficult way to handle things, because if you're going to have a lockdown, how do we deal with these people who are going to make a living? So some of the things that you can probably do is to move towards some kind of home-based businesses where you can actually encourage production of some kind of goods and services, and some kind of government or related interventions in addressing to support these particular people. Another aspect is we can still continue tourism where the borders are closed if we promote tourism within country. Particularly in Sri Lanka, having 21 to 22 million people, I mean, there is significant potential for internal tourism. So that will sometimes generate some kind of benefit, even though the foreign exchange is not coming in, which is usually the large amounts of money. There is still room for some kind of tourism within the country as well, which will support these unregistered or micro businesses on an ongoing basis. In saying that, if we are going to go forward in the economy in terms of internalizing our viewpoints, there is significant scope to mobilize these small businesses in a more collective way. I mean, most of the micro businesses don't have guided direction. They are just doing their own thing and not doing anything in a coordinated way. So there would be some benefit in having some coordinated direction through some kind of structure, government structure or related professional body structure. I'm not sure what that combination would be. Maybe Dr. Cabral can further elaborate on that maybe. But if we have some kind of structures like this, we can better address some of these issues.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lakmika. I think there is a question which I think should be for Dr. Harsha Cabral. They are really talking of the central bank. I think independence of the central bank and the role that they can really play in this COVID-19, because I think one of the biggest problems that have arisen is the funding side, where a lot of people are applying for loans, and the government has also given very maybe low rate of interest on that, and there seems to be a big delay which is affecting them. Is it possible to make some comments on this, Dr. Harsha?
Yes, Lakshman, the issue is now immediately after the COVID situation, the most crucial thing was the debt moratorium. You see, now so the central bank had to step in, because the people who have existing leases, who have housing loans and business loans, so for 3 months now they were unable to pay the loans. So now in such situations, so the central bank stepped in and informed. I'm also involved in one of the banks, which was listed in one of your slides also, where it was specifically told that we were told, okay, evictions, trying to execute those agreements, parent execution cases, all to be stayed for a couple of months, and then to go for a debt moratorium. To tell them that okay, they will not be, they won't be able to, they will not be asked to pay for a limited period, and thereafter we'll have to rethink how it goes and if we come out of it. So there were a large number of cases who opted for the moratorium. They came forward. There was a deadline that was given. So that came from the central bank. But still, what was coming from the central bank was not adequate, right? And because they should have made a proactive role than that. And so because of that, there was a strong accusation by His Excellency the President a couple of days ago with regard to the role played by the central bank, saying that, okay, what if the formula I have suggested is not adequate, why don't you come up with your formula? So now yesterday, they have come up with a better package. In addition to the relief that has been given to the public at large via the banks, right? And so certain other lending institutions also, whether it's a bank and other lending institutions, to go out to the public and help them to see that they have the money to spend and get the economy, to give a kickstart to the economy. So there is a major role the monetary board will have to play in this particular game, because now that we have export ban also, import ban also, right? So we have to reduce because as you know, we have got a double barrel shot, because we relied a lot on the foreign exchange that was earned by the Sri Lankans who are working out of the country. Now that was also crippled, and our exports were also limited to a certain extent because the buyers are not in a position to buy. So now we are picking up, but then again the tourism, right? So those were directly impacting the economy. So the role played by the central bank, I must say, to a certain extent, okay, but they can do better. That has been the debate last few days, and I believe yesterday itself they have been more proactive to help the public at large.
Thank you, Dr. Harsha. I think we have a question for Professor Ho. You are there, Professor Ho?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. I think one of the things was you analyzed those 10 companies, which you said were the first 10 in the list of the Sri Lankan quoted companies. Now, what do you think, of course, would be the main factor that they should consider in this COVID-19 pandemic? What is the sort of, as a quoted company, they have a lot of maybe obligations and also a lot of areas they need to consider. In your opinion, what do you think would be the best way that they can really fight this COVID-19 pandemic?
I think the economy of Sri Lanka is very different, and also your companies are very different. In fact, I actually was quite surprised that among your top 10 companies, the amount of goodwill is very low, right? In that sense that I think a lot of the companies are actually growing what is so-called organically. Maybe the thought pattern here is for some of these companies to grow more aggressively through acquisitions, right? In that sense that they should be able to build what is so-called a much bigger base in which for them to be able to compete in international arena. Sri Lanka has plenty of resources, and you have people as a density, your domestic market. See, I think what you need to do is that you may want to consider how these companies can further enlarge themselves, because in today's global trade world, if you don't have the size, you don't have the scale, it's very hard to compete in the international arena when you are a lot smaller. So in that sense, that my thought pattern is, you look at the economy of Sri Lanka and see how some of these companies can systematically either grow through mergers, through acquisitions, and then bring with them the entire supply chain, the entire so-called industry, and move the whole industry upwards, rather than each of the company by themselves only doing certain part of the work. So this is my thought pattern, right? Create density. What you may need to do is that your industry, your companies must be big to compete at the global stage, at the global arena. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Ho. Can I hand over to Arun?
Indeed. Thank you very much for those responses, Ho and Dr. Cabral as well. Now, we have the result, which you are able to see on the screen, and you have the percentages with regard to the responses. So the greater number, the larger percentage, seems to favor learning more about how they can change governance in their business. Any thoughts on that, Vinasha?
Well, I'm sure CMA has no doubt got some ideas as to how that can be done. And of course, as we know, this is in aid of that aim. So I'm sure if you stay tuned to the CMA communication channels, you will find out a lot more about how you can change governance in response to COVID.
Good. There has been an eagerness. And now we would like this juncture to resume where we kind of interrupted earlier, because joining us now is Mr. Mani Jayasinghe, and we would certainly like to hear from him. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun, and I'm extremely sorry that I was unable to connect due to some technical problem at my end. As usual, technology seems to fail at some crucial points. But anyway, now that I'm on, I think on this topic, one area that we want to mention is we are in difficult times, but difficult times does not require you to sort of let your guard down and give up what you have done or learned. So when it comes to governance, this is not really a time where you should be letting your guard down. On the contrary, governance should be applied much more stringent, but taking cognizant of the current environment in which we are functioning. So that's an important factor that one has to look at, and you have to always look at ways and means of tweaking what we know and what we have done in order to meet this new requirement. In addition to that, I would also like to mention, I think from an education point of view also, these are the times for us to basically ensure the fundamentals that we have learned has been is properly practiced. So with that, I would also like to sort of mention there is a lot of debate about should we to some extent let our guard down, because these are not times that you can practice your normal procedures or processes in relation to governance. Should we not relax some of these rules in order to address the current circumstances? My view is not really. These circumstances probably need to heighten governance, not necessarily relax, and address some of these new issues that are coming up. Say, for example, there are new elements. Today, cybersecurity is going to be a major issue. Confidentiality is going to be a major issue. A lot of people are talking about working from home and things like that. How do you ensure confidentiality when you work from home? How do you safeguard, how do you safeguard your access to your back-end computers? Cybersecurity is at the highest today. There was a recent survey done. They're saying cybersecurity activity is the highest. So all these require governance to be in place, but maybe with a different focus. At some point, I would like also to come and maybe tell a little bit about CMA and the professor, but maybe after the Q&A session, I can do that.
So thanks to Mr. Jayasinghe, who's advocating taking things back to basics and doing them right, which is an idea certainly supported by what Dr. Cabral has already said, as well as ensuring that governance is geared to handle today's challenges, which we heard from our other experts as well. So we hand over the proceedings back again to the founder and president of CMA, Professor Lakshmanar Vatawala now.
I think, I don't know whether Manil said that he wants to give some comments. If you have Manil anything, maybe short comment before we wind up.
Yeah, just to mention, Professor, just to say that I think in the education field, you have been associated with accounting education and professional education for a long time. You have been a past president of CA Sri Lanka, and also you were instrumental in the formation of AAT Sri Lanka as well as CMA, which is all in the accounting education. So you are one of the, how should I say, cornerstones of our society and accounting education or professional accounting education. You were also instrumental, Professor, of in the founding group of SAFA, where this Federation of South Asian Federation of Accountants were founded. I think during your time. Today, that is taking up steam. So you have probably contributed a lot to the accounting, professional accounting education in this country, and professionalizing the whole accounting profession. But I think we have a long way to go. In difficult times like these, it is the accounting profession that can help economies and businesses to weather the current storm, if you want to call it that. I think it's more than a storm, it may be even a cyclone. I'm not too sure of that, but we have to work towards that. And you have so far done quite a bit in this field. As I said earlier, we mustn't forget our foundation. The foundation still holds strong, but with this foundation, we need to now focus on the new normal and make sure that we can move forward and make sure that from our professional point of view, that we address these challenges, help businesses to weather this storm, and for us to move forward.
Okay, thanks, Manil. Before I give my concluding remarks, maybe I'd like our special invitees today, our Associate Professor Lakmika Perra, then also Professor Ho and Dr. Harsha Cabral, maybe just give your final comments before we do the closing remarks. Dr. Lakmika, can I?
Yeah, sure. So I think Dr. Cabral mentioned that, you know, in terms of Sri Lanka, we already have some significant governance structures in place, and I tend to agree. So some of the comments that I gave was to further refine some of the already existing structures to meet the requirements of the country in going forward. So there's a balance here, and I think we are on the right path at present to get there. So that's that will be my concluding comment.
Thanks, Professor Ho.
I think what I'd like to say is the fact that in terms of governance, I think the accountants will have to have a significant role to play. I think the accountants, to a certain extent, are the one that will look at the values, the one that will provide what is so-called the skills needed to shore up businesses and to provide the integrity and also to provide the meaningfulness in terms of people investing their money. I think the accountants will have to continue to discharge their role well in this post-COVID-19 world. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Harsha?
Yeah, I would like to say with regard to the corporate structure, the corporate world, the corporate side of Sri Lanka, both the public and the other corporate sector will definitely bounce back within the next 3 months. I'm very positive that the way things are moving, they will bounce back strongly. And there is a saying that when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And I'm sure that we can prove it.
Thank you. I think we need to now give the final comments as Arun mentioned. So first of all, let me thank all our special guests today, especially the Dr. Lakmika who delivered the oration, the Founders Day oration. I think that was very well said. And of course, the expert comments that were made by Professor Ho and Dr. Harsha Cabral, and also the presence of the President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. I know that he had a council meeting, but he said that he would step aside and come, and I'm thankful to Manil. And our Vice President, Mr. Hennayaka, the council members, the members who are present here. As you see today, I think a lot of us have spoken of what is happening today, the problems that we are encountering. But today is really a day that we are looking at how this organization was started. I think this is very important to all of us, because if you just listen to what the Excellency, the President mentioned yesterday, I was listening to the TV, he really wants to get things done. So I'm happy that from our point of view, as professional accountants, both chartered and the management accounting, we have been able to launch a professional management accounting body. And at the inception, you know the problems that one would have had. So that's why we are very thankful to the late Kingsley T. Wickramaratne, who was the Minister of Trade and Commerce, because he was able to give us, when we wanted to form it as a society, he permitted us to use the name Sri Lanka. Because he knew that this is something really worthwhile for the country. Of course, I could not ask him for money to set up the institute. I told him, at the moment we have made some links with Canada, with CMA Canada. can you kindly give me a letter of recommendation to the Canadian High Commission so that the Canadian International Development Agency or CEDA would be able to consider our application. Now, I think that's the way that we need to work, because I just read in the papers, 10 new universities to be set up. See the vast amount of costs. But if we really look at currently what is happening, the digital process, the digitalization that has taken place, can we look at other alternatives which will give much more value at much lesser cost? Now, professional accounting bodies, we have got the assistance from Canada at the initial stage, and also the technical assistance from CMA Canada. Now, you must be wondering as to why we would have gone to a foreign organization to get the assistance. At that time, it was very essential because there was a foreign management accounting body that was operational in Sri Lanka. So we had to go to another much more recognized body in the world. So CMA Canada was such a body, and today all the professional accounting bodies in Canada have amalgamated and therefore form the Chartered Professional Accountants, or the CPA. So we are much more stronger than what we were earlier, where the three bodies of the Chartered Accountants, the CGA and the CMA have got together. So that's how things began. There are a lot of people who had helped in this, our international connections and others. So I must thank all of them, especially the Canadian High Commissioner at that time, who came in and helped us. And up to date, the Canadian High Commissioner whoever is there in the country would be one of our patrons. So that's the sort of respect and the recognition that they are given to them, and we are very thankful. I mentioned of Honorable Kingsley T. Vikramaratne, and of course Professor G.L. Piris. They were there at the inauguration. And where do you think that we had the inauguration? 3rd of June 2000. It was the Hotel Ceylon Intercontinental. Today, it is the Kingsbury. And then we had 300 our founder members there, our founder council, and of course the advisory council chairman, Dr. GCB Vijay Singh, and the other members. So it was really a good start for us. I know that this is not an easy process, because a lot of them were maybe some of them were for it, some of them were against. Even at the time that we were signing our formation of the Society of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka, 2 or 3 people who were supposed to sign even pulled out, but we were able to get others to help. So I must especially mention our first council, which included Mr. Ananda Vehal, Mr. Esman Satarasinghe, Mr. Bashir Ismail, Mr. Fred Puimana Singha, Nilima Kasichetty, Mr. Tyagarajan, and of course with me, and they gave all the support to bring it to this level. And I must especially thank the late Dr. GCB or Gamini Vijay Singh. He accepted to be the chairman of the advisory council. And I remember him saying, Lakshman, don't worry. All things that you have done have succeeded. So I'm sure you will make a success of it. So definitely, I think those words of encouragement still stay in my mind, and it has really helped to build this organization. Then in addition to that, we had the foreigners, Ms. Joy Thomas, who's currently the CEO of CPA Canada, Professor John O. Miller, who was then the professor of the business school of Swinburne University, Mr. Raman from India, and of course the late professor from Dr. Khawaja Amjad Ismail from Pakistan, who also was a great supporter and helped us a great deal. So I'm sure that everyone thinks that things would have been very, very smooth, but both locally and internationally, we have had difficulties. But I must especially thank the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, because that's the place where I started. I was able to make a big contribution there. And also, where, as Manil mentioned, on the South Asian Federation of Accountants. And they supported us for the membership of the International Federation of Accountants. I think that was really a turning point. And today Sri Lanka has 3 members on the International Federation of Accountants, that is the AAT, the CMA and Charter. So I think we are one of the few countries that have 3 bodies on the IFAC membership. So that's a very, very good development in the accounting profession, and we are very happy that we have been able to do this, and also we've also been able to contribute from the point of view of the government, because chartered accountants have always been playing a lead role. But I also remember, I think just mentioning what Excellency the President was mentioning, that want to get things done. Because one of the things when I was there as the BOI chairman was to set up the 200 garment factories program, the first program to take the factories to the provinces. And it was under the direction of the President that we were able to do it. So I think today what is happening is correct. The President has to give the correct leadership and the others will follow. And I think the same today, the COVID-19 pandemic that we are having, the situation where the President has taken the leadership, the command of the army, giving the support to the health services. This has really helped Sri Lanka. So we need this. We need training and education, because as I read, even the international organizations say that there should be more professional accountants in the public sector. So that is what we are doing. But I have been really, I must tell you that sometimes these decisions are not carried out. In 2014, when His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president, there was a cabinet paper submitted and the cabinet approved it in 2014, and to recognize the CMA qualification, to serve in the government service, to recruit them, the corporations that are running at losses to have management accountants or cost accountants. Unfortunately, these things are still to be implemented. We have been pushing, but ultimately I think something should happen. But this is what is happening. We need to ensure, because we were incorporated by an act of parliament, but then when it comes to a cabinet decision not carried out, I think this is a very, very serious matter. So that's why we need follow-up. And I think in the private sector, that is very, very common, but in the public sector, that is very much lacking. But today we see that it is happening. So I'm sure there are very many things to say, but I do not want to go through in detail. But it's not an easy journey, one would say, but I'm very hopeful that we have been able to produce management accountants. We have been able to save the foreign exchange to this country, which is today a very, very crucial thing, because the country is very much short of foreign exchange. Our exports have gone down. So we have done this. And also we've not been a burden on the government. If the government is able to look at the professional bodies, the Chartered Institute, our institute, the AAT and others, and see how they are managing. They're managing their own funds. I think the education can be taken to very greater heights, and also opportunity is given to the those who are passing the A-level to come into this field and be useful citizens. As professionals, we have a special care of integrity, of ethics, of governance. So these are important characteristics that are required for everyone. So let me once again thank everyone. I must thank our present council who's been really supporting me, our previous councils, and everyone who has been really advising us, the advisory councils, and also the staff. There are a few who have been there from the earlier stages. They have been working, plus the new ones who have come in. But they've all been working very hard, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, where they have been all rallying around and even working from home to ensure that we are able to provide the services to the students. One of the things that we did was we gave the free digital education to the students who are going to sit the June 2020 exam. So these are things that we need to do. These are maybe obligations that are there. We like to serve them. And these are some achievements that we can really talk of. So today the whole world is changing. We must look at the good things that have happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can we now look at new ways of promoting the education? Can we look at hybrid education? Can we look at digital education and solve these problems when we have 160,000 passing the A-level, 35,000 not going to universities? What are we going to do to the balance? But today, the COVID-19 pandemic has given that solution. We can either do full digital or we can do hybrid and then double or triple the numbers that can be done. They can make use of the professional bodies because we are really able to expand much more and provide the services that is required. So once again, let me thank everyone. And I'm indeed happy that our friends from overseas, I think Professor Ho, he's been our advisory council member supporting us always. Dr. Lakmika, who's been, I think both of them on the integrated reporting awards governing on the judges. I think it was very, very good that Professor Lakmika mentioned about the integrated reporting and the integrated thinking, which will really help us to overcome this COVID-19 pandemic. And most of our companies are really practicing that. And I'm sure that we will be able to take it forward. So, and also Dr. Harsha Kapral, expert on the legal side, on the company law. He's been always been a supporter of us and helped us in many matters. And I must thank all of them for their great support and assistance. And also all our founder members, as I said, there were 300 on the initial day. And thereafter, some more came, going up to about 600. All of them have been supporting us right from the start. Our students, the people who have passed the exam, people who have become new members, I think they have to now, as Manil mentioned, sustainability is very essential. Now, this was one of the questions that the CEDA asked me. How are you going to sustain this organization? I just told him one answer. I'm the one who started this AAT, and you can see the success of this organization, and that was able to convince them to fund the CMA. So we have been able to also go in the same direction. So that's a very, very proud achievement for all of us. I think the CMA, the staff, the council members, the advisory council, and all our training partners who have really helped us a great deal. So once again, let me thank all of you for your full support, your cooperation and assistance. I must also mention about Honorable Bandula Gunawardena. He was really able to take the bill to the parliament. I don't know whether you know that it was a top secret till it was tabled in parliament. And then once it was tabled, the problems and maybe representations were done. But certainly, I think he was able to see that this is a body that is going to help the country and the citizens of this country. It was not a personal thing. It was something for the people of this country. And I really salute him, the Honorable Jairaj Fernando Pulle, who started the process. So these are people who really think of the country. As a politician, their thinking is a little different from the professionals. But I'm happy that we have been able to think in the same way, to do something for the people of this country, do something for the future of this country, and also to see that we have our own bodies, because once it is incorporated by an act of parliament, what is applicable, the management accounting techniques should be applicable to the government. We have just set up our management accounting standards board. Very soon we'll be doing that, and then we will be able to give it to the government in order that they could implement in the government institutions. So cost control, expenditure control is very, very important. And that's, we'll see, and of course, the integrated reporting, the value addition. What is the value that you are creating? So much of money is being used in business organizations. Then at the end of the year, they give a report. This is the value we have created. Do you get the same thing from the government ministries? They must do that. Then when they do it, we will know how the taxpayers' money, the money that have been borrowed from various foreign institutions have been used for the benefit of the people of this country. So management accountants, chartered accountants, accounting technicians, all have to play a very, very leading role in this country. So once again, thank you very much. And let me hand you over to Arun. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have all been treated to what might be referred to as the inside story. Thank you very much for sharing all of that. And also, I am reminded now of what Mr. Manu Jayasinghe has said a little while ago. A lot has been done, but there's yet more to be done. Well, thank you all. We say, Dinasha.
This is usually the part in the proceedings where we tell you to travel home safe, but we're mindful that you now have a very short commute. So we'd like to say thank you very much for your engagement, for your participation, and obviously thank you very much to the speakers as well. And with that, we bid you all a very good night.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
So thank you, Arun and Dinasha, for conducting that session very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arun and Dinesha. Thank you, Latmika. Thank you, Professor Ho.
Thank